welcome to Level Up and Friends, where those of us from the video game and comic book store, Level Up Entertainment, get together with some friends each week and talk about something we're passionate about. This week we're doing the fabled Frasier episode, a long-running joke amongst several podcasts that we are involved with. But you know, it's the time has finally become right.
It's finally happened.
Yeah, I'm your host Scott, and joining me, I've got Mr. Hedge here.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be. It's good to finally be on an episode of a podcast that talks about really the only thing worth listening to, which is Frasier.
I mean, how many Star Trek episodes have we done? Like, I would argue, you know,
so many. Frasier is the sort of the sassy sister show to Star Trek.
I mean, Kelsey Grammer's in Star Trek.
Exactly.
Then there was
Captain's on ship.
Yeah, and I was about to say, and there was that like, what show was it on where like the Frasier cast was like on Janeway's crew?
There was an opening for, I believe it was the Emmys, where they did a sketch where Janeway was the captain of the Voyager and the crew was replaced with various Frasier cast members, which was really quite amusing.
Yeah,
because it combined two things I love: Janeway and Frasier.
Yeah, we'll eventually talk about
Granger. There's no way to combine those.
Yeah, no, they don't portmanteau well together. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about the genesis of this show. I guess this isn't a hard argument to make, but it's probably the most successful spinoff of all time. You know, it's Frasier.
Oh, obviously, yeah.
Yeah, Frasier's a spinoff of Cheers. I don't even know what would be competition for it. But you know,
I mean, maybe you get like Laverne and Shirley, which is a spinoff of Happy Days, but there's not. I mean, you're not going to Joey from Friends.
Like I barely even remember Laverne and Shirley.
There's lots of them that fizzle out.
I barely even remember them being a part of Happy Days. Like Frasier and by a smaller extension Lilith were like fairly like regular cast members of Cheers for a long time.
Oh yeah. Frasier, there is an urban legend. I don't know how much confirmation that you're gonna get from serious sources that the Frasier character was created to be part of a love triangle between Sam and Diane. The first 5 seasons of Cheers are all about Sam and Diane and their will they, won't they romantic relationship. And Frasier was this psychiatrist who met Diane while she was at a sort of a sanitarium. She was off getting mental help because Sam gave her a complete mental breakdown. And Frasier was created to be just this very good-natured guy who understood that Diane had issues and was there to take care of them. And they were engaged, and she left him at the altar, and he went to the bar, and he sort of never left. And the rumor was that after his story arc ended, that Shelley Long wanted him off the show, that they did not get along terribly well. Mm-hmm. But the writers, in order to tweak Shelley Long, kept writing Frasier into episodes of the show. Mm-hmm. And eventually decided they really liked writing Frasier. That at least is the urban legend side of it. I've seen it reported a couple of times. There's a part of me that thinks it's insane that you would write an entire character onto a TV show to irritate one of the actors. But it was the 80s, so you never know.
Yeah, and she's a woman, so, you know, screw her.
Absolutely.
I mean,
never good.
There's bits and pieces I like about Cheers, but overall, like, I only watched it in its entirety for the first time a couple of years ago because it was on Netflix. And then I was like, after that, I was like, well, now I've got a taste for it. I rolled right into Frasier. And watching them back to back, it's like night and day, the shows to a certain extent. And like the Frasier's arguably a much better show. Like I think Frasier and Lilith are my favorite parts of Cheers. I mean, I like Woody. You know, like there's stuff that's not so there's stuff that's not bad, but it's like overall like the what each show is like aiming to go for or like I prefer the Frasier versus Cheers. I definitely get why it was popular at the time, but
well, Cheers is, for the first half of Cheers, it's a romantic comedy really that's about Sam and Diane, and everybody just sort of circles around that central premise. And then after Diane leaves the show, because Shelley Long left halfway through Cheers, it becomes a workplace comedy really it changes to its focus entirely. So it's kind of two different shows.
Yeah,
And
that
then
earlier
Frasier
stuff's
is a
stronger.
manners comedy.
Yeah,
The
and
earlier stuff is much stronger, and it's also
yeah,
much darker.
yeah, it's darker than I think people
The
might
first
remember
season
it
of
for.
Cheers,
Yeah, well, because it's like,
there is an episode I believe. Go ahead.
oh, so yeah, because it's like, it's not just a workplace comedy; it's like a bar. So it's like the same guys being there all the time, complaining about how much they like hate their wives and stuff.
Yeah, it's sort of, it has to be dark on a fundamental level, and the fact that, I mean, Sam Malone, who's the main character, for those of you who don't know, Cheers takes place in a bar. Ted Danson's the bar owner. His character is an alcoholic who owns a bar. And there is a very dark episode, I think, in the first season of Cheers, where the entire episode is people trying to convince him not to drink himself to death.
Yeah,
It is a dark television program,
and he
and
does
Frasier
fall,
had
yeah,
some dark moments, but
and Sam fell off the wagon a couple of times over the show.
there was some dark stuff, and even the Frasier character, there's a running, there's an arc which leads into Frasier,
Hmm.
where Lilith cheats on Frasier. Frasier and Lilith, this romantic relationship between them being a major arc on the show.
Hmm.
Lilith has an affair, and Frasier spends a whole episode attempting to commit suicide.
Yeah,
Where that is again, the 80s.
yeah,
That was a joke on that show, but it leads into what Frasier becomes, which is this idea that he's moving across the country to sort of try and reinvent himself after the final collapse of that marriage. So it does give the show something very different. It's about a character, trying to be different from what they've been before,
oh,
trying to get this fresh start.
and Frasier, the show, uses its history from Cheers, I think, very effectively, because
Mm,
the fallout with Diane factors into the
mm.
show.
Oh
um
yeah.
Obviously, like, Lilith and their relationship, because they have a son over the course of
Mhm.
Cheers, and like, so he still like is an estranged father. They use like weird little bits of history, like in Cheers, he's on half-handedly mentions that, oh, my father's dead, but now that they want to use the father character, when Sam shows up, it's like, oh, he told me you were dead. Like, like they mentioned that kind of stuff. You do see Frasier's
Yeah.
mom once in Cheers, and I don't think it's portrayed like any kind of way, like the relationship's portrayed like kind of how they eventually do
She
it.
threatens to kill Diane.
Yeah,
She shows up. She offers Diane money to leave Frasier, and then shows her a gun and threatens to kill her.
yeah,
So it's a weird relationship, and they show a flashback version of Hester Crane in Frasier and present her far more lovingly and sort of in a kind and gentle position. But as part of the Frasier background, eventually you discover that Hester cheated on Martin, cheated on Frasier's father,
yeah.
which becomes a bonding moment for the two of them. Martin and Hester were able to work through that in a way that Lilith and Frasier were not.
Hmm.
But there is an amazing amount of sort of very dark subject material within Frasier, which, one of the reasons I keep going back to Frasier is because it's a delightfully pleasant show to watch.
Yeah,
It's got people with soothing voices and fun little things happen.
yeah. Also, let's put Cheers in the past now, and let's focus
Oh yeah.
entirely on Frasier. So, like, what was your like introduction to the series like?
It was one of those shows that was sort of always on. It was it was part of that Thursday night NBC block. If you were going to watch one of them, you ended up watching all of them.
Hmm.
And I don't remember being super fond of it until pretty late in its run. Frasier goes on way longer than anybody sort of expected.
Yeah,
I
11
mean, when I think
seasons. Yeah.
it's 11 seasons, it goes from the 90s into the early 2000s. So I didn't really get into Frasier until I was in high school, I would say.
Hmm.
Um, and then it was a matter of trying to find all of the early Frasier. There were always reruns on Channel 11 here in New York, and there were, eventually I found cheap versions of the DVDs. But it wasn't until after college that I started just going through it over and over and over again in a loop, where it became it's a touchstone for me in terms of media. It's one of those things where I can always go back to it and find new things and enjoyable things, and it's a comfort food TV show for me. What about you?
I watched it when it was on. So the show came on in the 90s. I was a kid. There's shows. I don't know why this show and Seinfeld. My parents let my brother and I stay up and watch every week. But we watched them every week when they were coming out. And like as an adult, I get way more of the jokes now.
Oh yeah,
But like I still really enjoyed it as a kid, and I can't explain why. But
because you were smart and you
I
had good taste.
I guess I'll agree with that second half, maybe not the first part. But, but you know, like I just one of those shows like it's stuck with me, and I think because the show has a lot of like yes highbrow like humor, like it's not really like the show's about that. The show's really about the relationships between the characters, and just it's more like it is a funny show. I'm not going to try to downplay the comedy elements of it, but the show gets really dramatic sometimes too. And I
Oh
think
yeah,
that's what makes that's like its special sauce, you know, like I think the characters are so well realized in a combination with the pretty impeccable chemistry amongst everybody
it's
on the
spectacular.
show.
It's
Like,
there's no there. I don't think there's a show I can think of where from from the design of the program where they had a more impactful sort of just an interlocking sort of perfect structure in the cast. I mean, the simple idea that normally you have cast members that are designed to play off of each other in being opposites,
mhm.
but the idea that you would have Frasier and then Niles, who's Frasier but more Frasier than Frasier, is just such a clever idea, and the chemistry between them and the chemistry between Frasier, Niles, and Martin, just everybody works so well together and plays off so well together. It's a phenomenal show. It's a phenomenal cast.
Yeah, in my current, I randomly like a month or two ago started rewatching it. Not that it's a show that I never rewatch, but it's not like you mentioned you watch all the time. Like I'm like that with like The
Yeah,
Office, where it's just like something I can just have on in the background while I'm working on things.
that's my
But
Frasier.
like Frasier, I kind of like I feel like I want to pay more attention to. A because the joke writing is very clever. But like B
Mm.
like I don't think this gets brought up enough, but David Hyde Pierce is an amazing physical actor. Like
Oh my gosh, he's
he's
brilliant.
so funny. Like every little movement he does, like most of his stuff's real subtle, but then he has like those big over the top moments, and
Oh yeah.
it's always good.
There's the opening of Three Valentines, which is a phenomenal episode where they have these three short vignettes about what characters are doing on Valentine's Day, and the first, I want to say, 8 minutes of the episode are have no dialogue, and it's
Mhm.
just Niles Crane trying to get ready for a Valentine's Day date. I think maybe he has one line in the beginning explaining the setup on the phone,
Yeah, I think he
and
does.
then it's him, and then he systematically destroys himself over
Yeah.
the course of the next 8 minutes, 6, 7 minutes, whatever it is.
Mhm.
Where he just does this amazing silent Buster Keaton-esque physical comedy where he destroys Frasier's apartment, his own clothes, the couch, the dinner he was making. It's brilliant. There's another great one where he it's the episode where they are gonna get into a fight. High Crane Drifter is the name of the episode,
Mhm.
where uh, uh, the Frasier has gotten into a physical altercation with someone who's going to sue him, and Niles decides he's going to go up to this guy and get into an argument, and the guy pokes him with one finger, and David Hyde Pierce throws himself violently around the room, smashing into things, knocking over furniture. He crashes through a table
I,
in
I
order to.
I recently saw that one, and I liken it more to like he was like shot out of a cannon and
Yeah,
just
it's fantastic.
exploded everything behind him.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
yeah,
amazing. It's amazing. He's a brilliant physical comedian.
and it's amazing. He like you don't. He never really did like. Only other thing I can think of him being in is Wet Hot American Summer. Like I don't. Oh, and like the Hellboy. Like he's the voice of Abe
Right.
Sapien in the first one.
The first one, yeah.
But like, I'm surprised he doesn't do more. Maybe it's just by choice. Maybe he doesn't, want to do more things. But
he does a lot of theater.
yeah, like that might be
He
just
does a
more
lot of
what he's
off-Broadway
into,
stuff. And there's a lot of similarities between, like, there are episodes of Frasier that play like short plays.
Oh, it's almost all essentially like 1 or 2 act plays. Like, so much of
Yeah,
the show is them just sitting in Frasier's apartment, just dialogue, and it's great.
yeah,
Um, I mean, obviously, as the show
fantastic.
goes on and they get a bigger budget, like they can go and do more things. It's either usually just the coffee shop, the apartment, or the radio station. The booth there.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, it's not. There aren't many locations on the show, but it you never get a sense that they're cramped. Every once in a while, you get them at a restaurant. You get a
yeah,
Le Cigar Volant episode, or you get an episode like The Innkeepers, where they're trying to start their own restaurant and
yeah.
comedy ensues.
Oh, we'll get into
But
specific episodes later.
yeah,
But for now, I think like I want to talk like some of my thoughts going into this most recent rewatch, because I haven't rewatched it in a bit, and like I feel like the Niles Daphne like infatuation should be way creepier than it is,
it
because
should
also
be. I mean, academically, it's creepy.
yeah, no, like I'm watching it with that mindset now. I'm like, for some reason it does not come off like
It
that.
doesn't come off that way.
And I
I
don't know
think
if it's yeah, I say I my thought on it is because they imply in the first episode that like Niles is also helping pay for her to be there. So she's like his employee. She's a
yeah,
young, yeah. So it's like it's got like a lot of those dynamics, but like I think Niles is like, as much as like pompous and arrogant as he is, he's shown repeatedly to be like extremely kind of like pathetic. And I don't know if
yes.
that's a part of what makes it work. Slash, he and Frasier are constantly trying to do the ethical thing, where like you don't think like anything like serious would actually really happen
Well,
with
yeah, and
them. Yeah, I'm not sure. If you have
a
thoughts on that.
lot a lot of the relationship between Niles and Daphne academically, as I said, is not a great look for anybody involved,
Yeah,
except Daphne, who's fine. It violates a lot of boundaries. He's married when he starts to have this
yeah.
infatuation with her, even though one of the great running plot lines of the first 5 or 6 seasons of the show are the disillusion of Niles's marriage to his never seen sort of proto-human wife,
I mean,
Maris.
that's a brilliant move, by the way. I
Oh,
love
it's
that. I love that we never see her. It's like the shark from Jaws. What you
great.
have in your head is like nothing will ever match what you have in your head. You know?
Right. Right. The original plan for the show was to introduce her at the end of the first season, but apparently they wrote so many jokes about her that they said it was impossible for her to be a real person.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
had
Like
written enough stuff
there's no
where
one.
there's no
Yeah,
human being that can fit
yeah.
what we've created already, so we can't have her on the show. She's just an impossible sort of supernatural figure, and they use
Mhm.
her, I think, excellently throughout the show's run. The episode with the cruise and the Barracuda,
Yeah,
uh, with just there's some brilliant Maris episodes, but I think the reason why Daphne and Niles never comes off as creepy, I think you hit it, is this ethical sort of structure that uh, is put upon both of these characters, where Niles would never do anything that he believed crossed the line towards untoward in regards to Daphne, and Frasier is there to constantly call him on his sort of issues related to
yeah.
her. There's a great episode later in the run where Maris accuses Niles of alienation of affection, claiming that it was his love for Daphne that destroyed their marriage, even though we know that their
Yeah.
marriage was not great for a very long time before Daphne was ever in the picture. And in
I would
fact,
say like Frasier is probably a more a catalyst for that falling apart than
yeah,
Daphne was.
absolutely, 100%. I think if Daphne is not on the show, it's not as good a show. But
Yeah,
I think you still get the disillusion of that marriage because, it's Frasier telling Niles he sort of has to stand up for himself in that relationship. The
yeah,
the big thing that falls apart with their marriage is Maris goes missing for several days, where Niles has to call the police, and Martin calls in favors, and they track her credit card down, and she just went off on a shopping trip to New York for the week and didn't tell him where she was going,
Yeah,
and then demanded he apologize to her for making it seem like that was a big deal. I don't know, if someone just walked out of the house one day and never didn't come back for a week, that's an issue.
And that's like a straw that broke the camel's back thing, because like they've shown that like she definitely, because she was the person with all the money in the relationship, like
Right.
she never cares for
yeah.
Niles, like there was no affection in that
Very little affection. They
Yeah.
talk about how they had different bedrooms and in different wings of the house.
Yeah.
When they try and make it work again, she cheats on him with their couples therapist. It's
and it's just like as a viewer, you can see like it was it's and like Frasier brings it up too, as like the audience circus, like some marriages aren't worth saving, stuff like that, which of course he brings up during their couples session, like group session.
Yes, which is great for everybody else there.
Yes. A great bit of comedic juxtaposition.
Yes, there's one of my favorite running gags with Niles is him making jokes about the group therapy sessions he's missing.
Yeah. Oh, it's always great.
Like
the fear of commitment ones, where it's like, I can't break that again. Like,
I've already missed 2 sessions. It's there's some the idea that these people who so clearly are have a lot of their own struggles mentally, are in charge of other people's mental health is one of the.
It's a great like example of like when that's the big secret that they don't tell you when you're a kid. Like nobody knows what they're talking about.
Nobody's got everything.
Nobody knows what they're doing, and like it's a good reminder, even as an adult, like these extremely highly educated people that are like specifically educated in like the mind and mental health, like can have like, I don't want to say like they have major mental health problems, but like they deal with depression and like the same stuff that we all go through.
Yeah. They're human beings just like everybody else.
Yeah, and it's great. One other thing I've noticed, one other stray observation I've had on my most recent rewatch is like Frasier is this huge celebrity, but like people on talk radio, like did they ever get that big? Like I know this is also like years ago, a different time period.
I think he's very specifically supposed to be spoofing like the Dr. Ruth character, who was originally a radio personality who became huge. But giving Frasier the sort of like, there are people who visit from other cities who are like, oh, you're Dr. Frasier Crane from the radio. I listen to you whenever I'm in Seattle. Like, you would remember the name of a radio psychiatrist that you only listen to once a year when you're visiting your kid while you're in Seattle. But Frasier's love of his own celebrity is such a big part of the show that he's sort of addicted to the idea of getting sort of the perks of being a local celebrity.
Him being an egomaniac is a great humanizing touch for him too.
Fantastic.
I was actually just bringing that up because I think I'm on season 6 or something now, where Frasier loses his job. Like the station goes from talk radio to salsa, and he's like trying to get a new like TV or radio personality job. And I was like, why doesn't he just go back to being a psychiatrist, open up private practice? If he wants to help Roz out, like he can bring her on as like an assistant or like an administrative assistant or something, at least until she gets back on her feet, being a producer. But like, again, he's addicted to like that, people coming up and like, being like, oh, Frasier Crane from the radio.
He has to have it.
It opens doors for him at restaurants and stuff. Like,
there's a great episode where he calls for reservations at a restaurant that they want to get into, and he doesn't want to use a celebrity at first, and they can't seat him until 10 o'clock. And he mentions that he's Frasier Crane from the radio, and they get him in at 9:45, which is a big accomplishment. But that episode, the beginning of season 6, is they structure that episode around the grieving process and Frasier learning to let go of the fact that he's famous. He isn't famous anymore. They sit him down and they have an intervention where he has to come to grips with the fact that he's not famous. Frasier's egomania, Niles' jealousy of any sort of success that Frasier has,
Yeah.
the sort of fact that they're both Niles deep down inside wants the kind of public acclaim and celebrity that Frasier has, and Frasier wants the social respectability that Niles has, and neither of them realize that if they got what they wanted, they'd be just as miserable,
Yeah.
because that's just how they work.
Well, that's over the course of the show, like Niles goes through a whole roller coaster of status changes, but like
Oh
he's
boy,
only
yeah,
happy once, spoiler alert, he and Daphne eventually get together after this
do
real
get together,
road, Um,
mm.
and I love the way the
And even
series
then they
ends.
have
Yeah.
difficulties.
Yeah, oh yeah, they still do. Like it's not perfect, but it's the first time like you to see the character like really be truly happy. Um,
Hmm.
Even though there's successes and stuff throughout the show, but like yeah, Frasier and Niles' rival, like sibling rivalry, like is so alive, like throughout everything. Like you said, they're always button heads for these things. Like there's the episode where they're on opposing sides of this mental health debate. Oh, it's like an inheritance
Oh
thing.
yeah,
Um,
the episode with the railroad station where
yeah,
the
it's
gentleman has built
Sparky.
the, yeah. Hey, Sparky.
Yeah, but like Niles is it's a big high profile thing. He's on the son side. They're trying to get their father like I don't know, I forget the proper term for it, but like trying to say he's like not in health and the proper he doesn't have the proper use of his faculties. So like they're
This is
trying to
where we
like
could use Harry. He's
yeah,
got those legal terms.
so he can basically like stop spending all of their money on like
Yeah,
essentially throwing it all away.
right.
Um like a stewardship.
Yeah,
I think that's what it is, but
yes, conservatorship, something like that.
yeah. But
But yeah, Crane versus Crane. It's one
that's
of
such a
those great
great one. Yeah.
episodes where, uh, and there are a lot of episodes that sort of pit them against each other in a battle of just sort of snobbishness.
Mhm.
There is an episode Wine Club where both they're battling it out for the position of cork master in their wine club,
Yeah.
where they are this direct head to head opposition. Sometimes it's spurred on by Niles's second wife Mel,
Mhm.
who I think is an underrated character on that show, who sort of is a great chaos agent
Yeah.
for the middle of that show's run. Mel and Donnie, the alternative relationships for Daphne and Niles, I think both are great characters.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I agree.
Donnie is particularly difficult to hate, even though he's the person standing in the way of Daphne and Niles's relationship, and there's a lot of bitterness there.
Well,
He's a fun
it's
he's a
because
hopeless
it's
romantic who's a divorce lawyer. It's
well,
it's great.
neither of them like it's their fault, like that they kind of become the antagonists in the show, like
Yes.
which is why they work, which is
Hmm.
why he's saying like it's hard to hate him, like Daphne left him at the altar, like, and you could tell like throughout the series like they had a good relationship, and he's a nice guy, like
Yeah.
he helps the family throughout it. So we haven't talked about Martin much, and I absolutely love his relationship with everybody, like the core family members. I'm counting Daphne
Hmm.
in that since they all live together. Um, and what a great balancing act, because he's not impressed by their like high standing and credentials and whatnot. But like I love when you find like Frasier and Martin, and to a lesser extent Niles and Martin, like they finally get stuff to bond over, and
Hmm.
it's where a lot of the good drama comes from.
Yes.
And I that's one of my favorite parts of the show. Like I love a good Martin episode.
Yeah. Martin is really because Martin is what should be the counterpoint to Frasier and Niles, in that he's this blue collar, more simple taste kind of guy, but he never feels, except for in the very beginning of the show, where the first season of the show, Martin is like clinically depressed.
Oh
The
yeah, he's
character is
miserable.
far more downbeat. He's incredibly miserable. It takes him a long time to sort of get used to the living circumstance, and for him to become, by the end of the show, I mean, he's married. He's much happier than he was. He's a very jovial presence for most of the show's run. At the beginning, his relationship with Frasier is incredibly antagonistic, and they never fully lose that edge, which is nice.
Hmm.
But Martin is never the bad guy, which
Yeah.
I think is great for the show.
And I think,
He's
yeah,
never put in that heavy position.
and I think, like, I think he never really got, like, speaking just specifically at the very beginning, I don't think he ever really got over the loss of their mother. He has nothing in common with his sons. Like, he's kind of isolated from them. He has, he has his, friends at, McGinty's and stuff. He just got shot. He's like physically hobbled. Like, when he's a guy that probably was very used to being like able-bodied, being a
Very
police
active
officer
and
and
yeah.
whatnot. Yeah. So like his whole world is kind of just falling apart. And then, like the only reason he moves in with Frasier is like they're like, he fell down in the shower again. Like he can't, like,
Yeah, and
you know, and
he
he's not going to
actually
want to
can't
admit it.
take care of himself.
Yeah. And,
Yeah. He's forced into that circumstance, and a lot of those early episodes, there are a lot of very aggressive fights between Frasier and Martin about their living circumstance, but the with Martin's chair being this grand symbolic sort of totem for Martin's presence in the apartment.
yeah.
That Martin, when he moved in, Frasier dragged in this horrifying chair, which eventually is the most expensive piece of furniture in the apartment. But this glorious totem that Frasier has a tendency to destroy or go after or take pot shots at. Where there's a great moment in I think it is the episode where Frasier accidentally destroys Martin's chair.
Yeah.
Where Martin gets to give this little monologue about why he loves the chair. It's the chair that he saw the moon landing in. It's
Oh
the
no,
chair that he.
yeah. It accidentally
Is it
got
in that
thrown
episode?
out. Yeah. Because it's in like
Yes,
a
it's
play. He's
thrown
able to
out, not the
recover it.
destroyed.
Yes.
Right. It's a production of and then there were none.
Yeah.
Because they forced Frasier to play the doctor in that in the production because theirs gets sick on the night of.
Yeah.
But he gets to give this little monologue about why the chair is important to him, all of the sort of emotional moments that happen for him in that chair, what it means to him symbolically. And that chair is always front and center on that show,
Yeah.
even when they're even when they're trying to plan dinner parties.
Yeah. Oh no, it's like it's there like a monolith.
Yeah.
And but you mentioned like that scene, that's one of the great like bonding moments where like, like they get to see things from each other's perspectives. I love when they really get into it. Like I just watched Merry Christmas, Miss Moscovich, where they have to pretend to be
One of
Jewish.
my favorite episodes.
Where they have to pretend
Just
to be Jewish
fantastic.
on Christmas Eve.
Yes.
And Frasier's dating this woman, Faye, and like her mother comes in. They get into a big fight because she thinks her mom wants them to, like, she wouldn't accept them if they're not Jewish. There's this big fight, and then they hug and cry, and then they leave. And then they kind of have the similar experience, and they're like crying, and like Martin's like, I thought we'd get to the hug by now, and like stuff like that. It's
We don't know
really,
what we're doing. We're not Jewish.
yeah, it's really funny.
It's
And
fantastic.
and
It's
as a
one of
Jew,
the
like
best
that episode
Frasier
really kind of hits home.
episodes.
um
It's I that is one of my, I think that's the best of the Christmas episodes of Frasier. Purely for Niles popping out of the bathroom dressed as Jesus. If you
yeah.
haven't seen this episode, that's going to make no sense to you. But Frasier does a wonderful job of building all. Seinfeld had a good habit of doing this as well, where these desperate elements of the A, B, C, D plot lines eventually wrap together at the end to cause no end of trouble to the people involved. And that
And
is one of those great episodes where you get these two plot lines that seem to just be running parallel, just slam into each other at
the
the
show does
last second. And
a pretty effortless job of like building on absurdity. Like the episode
oh
where
yeah,
they buy a restaurant like starts so
yeah,
simple, and by the end,
yes,
like because all these little things happen, like the dominoes are put into place, like
yeah,
the place like explodes, a car's driven through the
yeah,
wind, like
yeah. Car drives through the wall.
through the wall,
The
like,
alarms are going off. Yeah,
yeah, but like you don't feel like this is ridiculous, like it jumped the shark or anything, which is
one
crazy
of
because this show's like relatively downbeat and realistic.
there is there's an episode of the show where Daphne throws a dinner party that I believe is called Daphne Does Dinner. where the first 1 minute of that episode is the previous dinner party, and the dinner party episodes are a recurring motif in Frasier, that Frasier and Niles cannot throw a dinner party for the life of them.
Yeah,
That
as
it's
much as they
something
try.
disastrous happens anytime they try and have some sort of fancy society function.
Like a dead seal washes up.
Yeah,
And
dead seal washes up on shore. There's a fight between two caterers. There's all this stuff. But the first 1 minute of that episode is the previous dinner party collapsing. So it starts with everybody storming out of the party. Frasier's date slaps him and says, "I bet you don't even have Tourette's syndrome," and then walks out. A chef comes out holding 2 lobsters and shoves them into Frasier's hands and says, "Lose my number." Frasier yells at Niles and says that, this is all your fault. And Niles says, "But you thought that flaming kebabs would lend an air of festivity. Someone's hair got on fire." And as they're bickering about all of this, Martin comes out in a blue sash, in a white tuxedo, and says, "Buongiorno." Says, no, Dad, you don't have to pretend to be the Count anymore. And it's the end of one of their dinner party episodes where all of the absurdity has collided, and it leads into Daphne saying, "Well, I can throw a real dinner party, a simple dinner party where nothing will go wrong." And of course she can't, because by this point in the show, she's a crane, and they're cursed. They're a cursed people. But they had such a good run of having these. It's like the Hall of the Mountain King, the song by Grieg, where it just slowly builds until it's this enormous bombastic thing, where it starts with a very small and little thing, and by the end of the show, there's a car driving through the wall. There's fireworks are going off. Roz has lit herself on fire. Daphne is beating Niles, and these are. It's brilliant. It's farce. It's a manners comedy. Frasier really does a lot of these things that you usually only see on the stage work really well in a half-hour television format.
Yeah. We haven't talked much about what I think is my favorite character in the show yet, and that's Roz.
Oh, Roz.
I love she slays Perry Gilpin slays every scene she's in.
Existence. She owns the world.
She's great. I love that she has a purely platonic relationship with Frasier throughout the course of the series, which is something like you still don't really see on TV with a grown man and a grown woman. Like, of course they're going to wind up together. I mean, they play with that a little bit every here now and then.
They had that. There is one episode in which they fiddle around a little bit. But that moment is enough to lead to, I think, the best scene between them, where Frasier sort of rides off to Roz's house, and they have a very honest talk about how important their friendship is with one another, where they really are a very supportive team by the end of that show.
Yeah, and like there's the one where like essentially Roz quits to go work on Bulldog Show as producer,
right?
And like Frasier can't get anyone to work right. Like he's had a couple of replacements for her. I remember there was I don't remember her name, but like she like would interject in the show all the time and basically became her own radio personality.
Dr. Mary.
Dr. Mary, yes, that it came to me as soon as you said it. But like, I also love that, like, yeah, she's a promiscuous character, but like she owns it, and like even though people like give her crap, she like throws it right back. And I love that she decided to become a single mom, like, and she could do it on her own. And everything, I find her very refreshing, especially in the context of the time period the show is coming out.
Oh, absolutely. And she never comes off as sort of she and Martin are sort of the very down talking, not manners politics type people, and sort of a parallel to Frasier and Niles. And they always talk about how Roz and Martin really like each other, and it's because they play poker together. Roz goes to his poker games. Because they are sort of they're working people, they're common people. There's that one image of Perry Gilpin or Roz holding up "I'm Union" on the as against the wall of the window of the recording booth, as her response to Frasier trying to fire her over forcing him to talk to somebody who doesn't want to.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's more of a working class, tough, hard as nails person, and she very early on in the show's run is established as someone who does not really conform to many stereotypes. She does what she wants when she wants to, and she doesn't really care what other people think.
Yeah, and that's
Uh,
great. I love that.
I will say that when I was originally watching the show, I thought that the twist in the show was going to be that Roz and Niles were going to end up together because of how much they didn't like each other, and
Oh, they hate
television
each other.
told
Yeah.
me that
Yeah.
they would have to at that point.
Especially since like Niles was very clearly like in love with somebody else.
Yes, absolutely.
It's how that's always how it goes down. I
Yeah,
mean, Niles and Lilith hook up at one point instead. So
they
who
do,
saw that
which is
coming?
a phenomenal episode of television.
Yeah.
Um, there's the waiter that keeps serving them in that hotel that just keeps coming back with the same order to the same room for different
But
people.
like there keeps being a different combination of people in the
Yes,
room.
and he
And
just gets to keep saying okay
okay,
and
yeah.
then leaving the room. Is he's brilliant. He's one of
Yeah.
my favorite one-off characters in any episode of Frasier.
Yeah. And there's so much good like supporting cast. Like BB's great, Bulldog's
all
great.
all of the agents in America, every
Yeah.
episode with BB Glazer in it is good.
Yeah.
BB Glazer is one of the standout characters. Frasier's agent on that show, who who gets this reputation very quickly that she might actually be Satan. There's one episode that implies she actually has some sort of demonic powers.
Yeah.
That, and she stops being Frasier's agent for a little while, becomes Roz's agent, and Frasier picks up a terrible agent who's nice to people.
Mhm.
She threatens to throw herself off the building in order to get Frasier a better contract.
Yeah. That what a great episode that one is. I remember that one as a kid and being like, when he goes out there to talk her down, she's like, play up for the cameras, the news is gonna be here soon,
Yeah,
But like
where
it was all part of like she's always got like layers and layers and layers on top of getting stuff,
of
which is why
everything
it's
she's doing.
surprising when he's out of work that she can't find him something
Yeah,
until the station goes back to normal.
right. No,
Yeah.
she's a brilliant supporting character. I like, and there's lots of good sort of the relationship characters.
Mhm.
Either people that Martin is dating, or Frasier is dating, or well, really, you only get Maris, Mel, and then Daphne for Niles. But
Yeah.
you've got fun characters that pop up in relationships with other characters as well. They're just interesting to have around.
Yeah. I do find it. I mean, I know they play this stuff up for laughs, where like how little like Frasier and those guys know anything about sports, but like he did hang out in a sports bar for like better part of a decade.
Right.
You got to pick up on a couple of baseball terms.
Yes.
I do love when Martin takes him to the batting cages though, because he wants to be a good softball player for
Yeah.
his
Yes.
son. It actually made me want to go to the batting cages. I haven't done that since I was like 11.
So you also wanted to get hit by a machine throwing balls at you like Frasier.
Well, I actually played sports, so like
There you go.
I'm not as incompetent, but I was like, man, I haven't done anything like that in a while. Plus, we've been talking a lot of baseball with the new season starting up like recently. So I don't know. I've just been kind of in the mood for something like that. But yeah, I don't know. So
I think the best Frasier sports episode is Niles sinking. There's two great Frasier basketball episodes. There's Niles sinking the 3-point shot in order to win. I think he won $10,000, something weird like that. He won some sort of prize for doing. He got randomly picked from the audience.
I mean, that's something that they do in like actual sports games. Like they'll just randomly pick somebody for like was essentially something impossible, like a prize like that.
Right. But there's also the episode where Niles becomes a sports psychologist to a player on the Seattle Sonics.
I was hoping you would bring that one up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an episode where by the end Niles realizes it's not his advice that this player is taking. It's the guy thinks that literally Niles is good luck, that rubbing the top of Niles's head gives him the ability to play basketball well. And Niles has an ethical dilemma where he doesn't want to support that kind of superstitious thinking, but at the same time, it's getting him access to basketball games that's improving his relationship with his father.
The whole city like is literally treating him like a hero because he cured this guy's slump.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
He gets the fame that normally is reserved for Frasier. but Niles is sort of defined by his ethical responsibilities, which again is the reason why he doesn't come off as creepy, because he gets, he gets nosebleeds whenever he begins. No, that's which one? No, Frasier becomes nauseous. Niles gets nosebleeds.
Niles gets nosebleeds. Yeah.
Yeah. Each of them has a violent physical reaction to unethical behavior.
Yeah, which is great. I think it helps them a lot, because like in a lesser series, these characters would be extremely unlikable and unrelatable.
Yes, and they are somewhat unrelatable by the dint of what their particular passions are, but it is easy to empathize with them, if not live in their shoes. It's easy to figure out where they're coming from in an emotional
because they're still still very human.
Yes,
and I think having Martin helps with that a lot.
An enormous amount,
because he also works a lot as audience surrogate, or like
yes,
even if they're trying to do something that's kind of like snobby and aloof, like they're trying to do something to like impress their father, which is something we can all relate to. Like when they're trying, like the for his birthday, they're out like outspending each other, and eventually Niles gets him like his old police horse,
Agates.
Yeah, Agates. That's one of the ones that always stood out to me as a kid, because that I love the scene at the end where like Niles is like, it's from both of us, even though like it's the that's the one where it's like Niles realizes like, oh, we saw how old the horse is now. He's like, it like brings out all these like feelings of like lost youth and whatnot. Even though he walks around with a cane, so I feel like I'd feel like that more often. But,
yeah, but
it's great.
Yeah, it's Frasier episodes are at their best when they are tweaking the sort of snobberies of Frasier and Niles, and when they are exposing how the relationships between the characters are developing, because there's a long arc line for the characters on the show. I was going to say earlier, there is an episode where Frasier is supposed to get a Lifetime Achievement Award, and he visits his old mentor from when he was at Harvard, Dr. Tewksbury.
Which I think is played by Renee Auberjonois, right?
Yes, who is, of course, Odo on Deep Space Nine, Take a Drink.
Yeah. If you guys haven't listened to our friend Harry's Star Trek podcast, Hailing Frequencies, watch that and then you can take a drink. We'll talk about Star Trek later because there's more things to talk about with this show. But anyway, yes, he goes and meets his old mentor.
Yeah, and he has this, he eventually breaks down where Dr. Tewksbury forces him to treat Frasier Crane, where he says, how would you, you've got these feelings that you don't know how to deal with. How would you treat it? And Frasier starts going through all of these analytical things. And have you read this article? And Dr. Tewksbury keeps saying, you've already read the article. It's you. You already know that technique. It's you. You already know this. This is you. Everything you can think of this person's got. Why do you keep trying to bury him in psychobabble? And Frasier breaks down and he goes, because it's all I have left.
Yeah.
And it's just this hugely emotional moment where Frasier sort of admits that he's been burying his own feelings about a lot of things under this psychiatric veneer, and learning why Frasier and Niles are psychiatrists and why they behave the way they do, and why Martin's relationship with his wife, and all of these sort of motivations the characters have. I don't know of another sitcom that digs into its characters the way that Frasier does.
I love, especially like at the time this wasn't done, especially not in sitcoms where like, where like the characters are, I feel like the more thought goes into like them as characters versus like how many jokes you can wring out of a situation. Because a lot of episodes, like if you're looking from purely comedy standpoint, like stall out like for the third act because they're going to be dealing with some real emotional stuff or some interpersonal relationship, but that's what my opinion, that's what makes the show so successful. And why, like 11 seasons is a long time for a sitcom.
It is,
like regardless of season, like what era we're talking about, like not counting the Simpsons, like because that's a beast that just won't die. Like
it is the Leviathan.
Like It's Always Sunny is like 13 seasons or something and still going, but like I can't think of anything else that really rivals it. Like most like end after 9, which is still really good.
Yeah, but and usually, and I know there's a number of people that think that there's some sputtering that goes on, that the show sort of loses a bit of its momentum in seasons 9 and 10. Although some of my favorite episodes of the show are
Oh
in
yes,
seasons 9 and 10.
this it's still good all throughout. Like
I think it's solid straight through.
I'm glad it ended before it got really bad. Like again, bringing up The Simpsons, like we talked like the reason like they had to write like a poo off is because he's like this weird anachronistic cultural relic, and it's like,
Right.
hey, if it was something like we'd be like, if it ended 20 years, we'd be like, well, it's from the 90s, like with that context, but like it's the fact that it's still going, like I
Yes.
don't know, like it hasn't been good for so long. I know I
And
talk about The Simpsons on this podcast almost as much as I talk about Star Trek. So like I obviously still care very deeply for it.
mhm.
In fact, the last Simpsons episode we did on Sideshow Bob, because I had started watching
Ooh.
Frasier. I was like, I had it on my mind. So I was like, hey, let's talk about this real quick.
Yeah.
Because
It's
I just went through and rewatched all his episodes, which is a much smaller task than watching 11 seasons of this. Not that although
yes.
this has been way more pleasurable because there's so much more bad Simpsons than there is good.
Yeah. And there is, of course, the Frasier connection to The Simpsons is fairly overwhelming by the end, because you have Sideshow Bob, played by Kelsey Grammer.
Yeah.
You have
So
Sideshow
Cecil.
Bob's brother Cecil, who's
Yeah.
played by David Hyde Pierce, his brother.
His
John
favorite.
Mahoney voices their father. Yeah, so they fully Fraserize The Simpsons eventually,
All
because
right. So
why not?
people should go back and listen to that episode, but I think Brother from Another Series I discussed in that is my favorite episode. Also because it serves as the ultimate, really the ultimate end goal for the Bob character, where like he has reformed and is teaming up with Bart and Lisa to stop another, another an evil plan that's not his. And then anything you do like after that just would by nature just regress the character,
Right.
unless
Well,
you go like this weird anti-hero route with him.
yeah, one of the things that one of the only things that I feel is a little sad about Frasier
Mhm.
is that various times in the show, like in the episode with Dr. Tewksbury, or one of my favorite episodes is an episode called Don Juan in Hell Part 2, which
Mhm.
is the first episode of the season after this two-parter where Frasier goes off with this woman, Claire, who is his best girlfriend over the course of the show.
Mhm.
It's the woman he should have ended up with, the only one that actually was good for him as a character, that really they worked together, they were great. He sabotages the relationship, and he goes up to this cabin that the family owns in the woods, and he hallucinates on the drive up there, and once he gets up there, all of his other major relationships.
Yeah,
So
and
he
that episode's it's like the Avengers of ex-girlfriends.
yes, and
Uh
there's even a great shot where he opens the door and he sees all of the other women he's dated over the course of the show, and
mm,
they managed to get essentially every guest actress that had been on Frasier to just stand in that doorway and wave to him for 30 seconds.
yeah.
And you've got Shelley Long as Diane, you've got Lilith, you've got his actual first wife, Nanette Guzman, who appears in one episode of Cheers and two episodes of Frasier, where he
Mhm.
married Nanny G, this children's
Oh yeah, yeah.
actress when they were hippies, um, and his mother, who comes back as they show her a couple of times for the show, and they psychoanalyze him. And he comes to this great realization about why he sabotages relationships, because the great antagonism on that show isn't Martin versus Frasier. It's not Niles versus Frasier. It's Frasier versus Frasier.
Mhm.
Frasier destroys himself, and when he's going after Niles, he's really going after the reflection of himself that he sees in Niles.
Yeah.
It's this relationship, and the fact that that wasn't like the end of the show, where he finally realizes, oh, I sabotage every relationship I'm in because of this thing.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
you
like
know,
it's a bit about
timing.
it's a bit about how it's a bit like why like Game of Thrones is as popular as it is, because George R. R. Martin says the only thing worth writing about is the heart in conflict with itself.
Yes,
Um
great line.
yeah, like yeah, I mean that's I mean the show is also extremely funny and
Yeah.
incredibly well written throughout the entire series.
Yes.
But like yeah, that is essentially like what it boils down to is no pun intended the heart of the show.
Hmm.
Um oh yeah. Yeah, so we were talking about Star Trek earlier, and I think this is a season 11 episode. and I think you know what one I'm going to bring up with a guest star Patrick Stewart.
Yes.
Um,
Phenomenal episode.
one of my favorite
character.
ones. One of my favorite episodes of the series. I think it's season 11. I should have looked this up ahead of time, but whatever. It's late. It's after TNG has been over. So I guess he was free, but like he plays Alistair, a hoity-toity, like, you know, theatrical director who's gay and kind of has a little bit of a, you know, Frasier sort of enters like a moderately fraudulent relationship with him. So he gets access to all this high society and like stuff.
Yeah.
But it turns out, you know, Alistair doesn't partake in sexual relations while he's working, and the show's about to end. So they're able to kind of like Frasier's able to kind of like deal with it, you know, the fact that he's not actually attracted to this man on a romantic or and sexual level.
But let us be honest. Who would not engage in a romantic relationship with Patrick Stewart, even though you're not physically attracted to him?
I mean, you just said engage. That's all I need. So
yeah. Okay, I guess. I mean, you're Patrick Stewart. All right, where are we going? Dinner? Sure. You gonna buy me something fancy?
But like, I like that this happens frequently in the show, and I wonder if because like so many queer folks work on it behind the scenes and in front of the camera. But like the gay characters in it, like whenever they do like the gay panic stuff, like they're not the bad guy. It's
never.
Frasier and them that are the joke.
Yes.
And well, and like I love that once Alistair realizes like, oh, all right, he just immediately moves on with his life, you know.
And there are a couple of gay panic episodes where you get the matchmaker, which is
the matchmaker is probably my favorite episode of the show.
Really, I mean, it's a phenomenal episode. I can't fault you for it. It's Tom Buchanan is the character that Frasier is not on a date with, but is also on a date with.
Well, that show, like, to me, that's this is the quintessential Frasier episode.
Ooh.
Nobody's in the wrong. It's hilarious, but like all of the humor comes from misunderstanding and like clever wordplay. Yeah. And like I love that the characters in it sort of start figuring things out as it goes along, but Frasier is ultimately the one that's like the butt of the joke.
Yeah.
But like it's also got like now as an adult, I get this meta commentary at the end where he's talking about like all of the different characters. Like, you sure they're not gay? Where really the actors are gay.
The actors are gay. Yeah. When that show,
David Hyde Pierce and John Mahoney.
David Hyde Pierce gay. John Mahoney gay. The guy that played Dan. Oh gosh, his name just flew out of my head. Bob Bulldog Briscoe's actor is gay.
I believe there were several gay directors and writers they had, and I believe they both were on this one.
Yeah.
But like the show, I don't know. I find that one extremely hilarious. Like, if you want to, I think it's a good show. If someone's potentially curious about checking this out, I think that's a good one to start with, because it also really highlights a lot of the interrelationship like quirks and things between the main cast. Like even Roz to a lesser extent, even though she's not in most of the episode, but she is the one that kind of sets it off by like sort of setting him up. Like she could have told him that that Frasier's not gay to begin with, but like she was mad at him.
Yeah, and she wanted to see where that would go.
Yeah.
I think that's a great first episode. The episode I recommend people start with usually is, even though it's late in the show's run, is an episode called Door Jam, which is Frasier and Niles connive their way to get an invitation to a fancy new members-only spa.
Oh, yeah, this is a great one too.
Thanks to Roz's intervention. Again, Roz is the impetus for the plot. She was friends with the senator and managed to get them an in. And as they go into the spa, they realize that there's a silver door first, that has stuff that they can't get behind. And they realize that all of this lovely spa stuff they've been enjoying, that they just can't like it, and they move on to the next area.
Because there's something beyond the deal that like they're excluded from.
And I won't ruin it for anyone, because this is one of those ones that is in the end, their feelings of inadequacy, like there's another layer of society that they can't get into, eventually just completely blows up in their faces, and they are left in the garbage. But I think that Frasier is best when it is letting them destroy themselves.
Exactly.
And Matchmaker has that, Door Jam has that, and there's lots of episodes like there's The Club, which is an episode about them competing over who will get to join this fancy men's club in Seattle. The wine club episode that we talked about previously, where they're competing to see who will be cork master.
The restaurant episode.
Yes, the restaurant episode, Innkeeper,
Yeah,
which
Innkeeper,
is
yeah.
it's just phenomenal. And I also really love an episode that I've shown to a lot of people. I'm a teacher. I have done this. I've only gotten to do this once because of how the calendar works out. But on Leap Day, I used to show my classes an episode called "Look Before You Leap," which I think has the most triumphant ending of any episode, which results in Frasier not only getting something he richly deserves, but also allowing everyone else to sort of revel in a bit of Frasier's misfortune. As
Some Shoden Frasier.
yeah, oh,
Yeah.
we could categorize these episodes if we need to. Yeah, there's a lot of those Shoden Frasier episodes where the point is sort of rooting against Frasier because he's done something that we know he shouldn't. The episode with him in the parking garage is very much like that, where by the end of the episode, you're like, it's clear Frasier's in the wrong, and Frasier knows he's in the wrong by this point.
Yeah.
But he can't figure out how to get out of this situation with his ego intact.
Yeah. Yeah, like I love that, like every time that anyone in the show really has like a bad impulse, it does blow up in their faces. Like even characters like they're pretty much despicable, like Bulldog, like the one where he thinks becomes a hero for disarming the guy,
Yeah.
but really he misunderstood the situation and threw a pregnant Roz in front of himself.
Yes.
But like Frasier keeps trying to give him like situations where like he's trying to overwhelm him with guilt and shame, even though he's a guiltless, shameless character.
Yes. Yes.
That eventually like they just kind of do the Hamlet, like a false it plays the thing where I catch the conscience of the king situation.
Yes, very much so.
Where like he kind of does the same thing, but like they already set it up where like his mother and his pastor and all these people are there, and then all of a sudden like they realize that's what happened. He just he just got that like Man of the Year award or whatever.
Yes, and he does it again. He tries to throw a woman in front of him.
It's his mother this time.
It's his mother in this time, right?
Yeah. And it's
I'm gonna rewatch that episode when we're done because it's been a while since I've watched that one. It's a good one.
So I mentioned earlier the Matchmaker, I think, is my favorite episode. I think the funniest episode is called the Ski Lodge.
The Ski Lodge is I think it is the funniest episode of Frasier. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it is.
I watched it the other day and just like even knowing what is gonna happen,
it's brilliant.
It got the whole way through. Like again, it takes like a lot of like absurdities and miscommunications. Just like it keeps ratcheting it up. Like every scene pushes it forward.
Yes, it's the peak of that French farce sensibility that Frasier has in this run. It's so well written. I'm trying to remember, the gentleman who wrote The Ski Lodge also wrote, I think, all of my favorite episodes of Frasier. I have to look up his name or it's going to drive me Joe Keenan, who also I believe wrote The Matchmaker. Yeah, Joe Keenan is I looked it up. He wrote The Matchmaker, he wrote The Ski Lodge, he wrote Moon Dance, which is
well, my understanding is Moon Dance is more of like a Frankenstein's monster.
Where a lot of people had he was one of 8 writers that worked on that episode, I think.
Yeah, I think it was. I remember reading something like, and again, I'm like you before, I'm not positive on the validity of this, but I think it was something like it was they were crunched for time, so like each writer wrote like a scene, and then someone just weaved them all together. But it's like one of the most iconic episodes.
Good.
Yeah,
it's a Moon Dance is another one of those ones where if you want to understand the Niles Daphne relationship, if you're looking to get into Frasier and you're not sure, like, because the Niles Daphne relationship on paper looks a little weird, watch Moon Dance. Moon Dance, I think, is a great distillation of both why Niles is into Daphne, why Daphne will eventually fall for Niles, and why that relationship doesn't seem creepy.
Yeah.
Because even though Niles in that episode just sort of blurts out his feelings, he can't carry through with it because Daphne felt like this was a fun platonic night out and she really needed to have a friend, not someone who was, romantically interested in her. And Niles, Niles is not an incel. He does not complain about this. He does
Yeah.
not
No.
rage about how Daphne doesn't give him enough attention.
And you
He
know what?
just
I think I didn't think about that, but I think that does go a long way because
right.
a lot of the traditional trope would be like him constantly whining and complaining
Yeah, which
and
he
like
doesn't do.
doing the incel thing. Yeah.
He
And
does
like
not.
he does work on other relationships with her and like he knows like, hey, she's with somebody, I can't pursue her, stuff. Yeah.
Right. He
And then
doesn't try and
eventually,
blow up her
yeah.
life. He doesn't do anything that is so abundantly selfish that he would harm her in any way. And the only reason they get together is essentially because Frasier forces them to have a conversation about their feelings
While he's on
that
drugs.
while
Yeah.
he's on drugs.
Yeah.
And then sort of as she's planning on getting married, forces them to confront how they feel about each other.
And Niles is married now.
And Niles is actually married. Niles went
Yeah.
off and got eloped.
Got eloped. Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, it is. So yeah, I think that is, again, just to go back to that. I think that's a big part of why that doesn't come off as creepy. But Moondance is one
But
of those
yeah,
great
it's
episodes.
that's similar to that. I don't remember what's called, but it's the one where like, so Roz has like this bar which like never fails like for someone to get a hookup there, and she takes Daphne and Niles there, and they
Yeah,
each kind of get in a relationship that seems great for them on paper, but through shenanigans they eventually wind up there together, and they
right,
kind of so it's kind of played like, hey, maybe they'll wind up together, but they realize that like in their conversation like they both needed to get out and about because they just got out of like long relationships
right.
and it was good to get back out on the horse and like and Niles recognizes that's how Daphne feels and doesn't try to push anything
Yeah,
beyond that.
and it's got that great bittersweet ending where Daphne sort of just as a sign of friendship goes, I love you, Dr. Crane.
Yeah,
And Niles picks up his glass of wine and he just holds it there for a second. He goes, I love you too, Daphne. And then he
yeah,
takes a sip because it's genuine for him. He
yeah.
actually loves Daphne.
Mhm.
But it's their relationship is one of the cornerstones of that show. Frasier's absolute inability to date women is a cornerstone of that show, which is one of the reasons why the ski lodge is so funny,
Oh,
because
that's the best part of the whole
the
thing.
best part of the whole
Yeah,
episode
yeah.
is, yeah, go ahead.
Everyone's chasing each other through like a series of like miscommunications, like who likes who,
Mhm.
and stuff. So everyone's like kind of like going into each other's bedroom and stuff. And at the end, Frasier's talking about like, so in this like lustful evening, our hormones literally ricocheting off the walls. Nobody was chasing me.
Yes.
And then it's funny because the first time I saw that, I was like, even as a kid, I realized like, oh, nobody was. That's really funny.
No, nobody was interested in Frasier.
Basically, everyone's
Multiple
chasing
people going after
Niles
him.
more or
Yes,
less.
Niles. Niles was everyone was interested in. And of
Yeah,
course, the stinger is that, and one of the nice things about Frasier is they always do those silent outros over the
yeah,
credits, is that Annie, Daphne's friend, is interested in him at the end, but
yeah.
he completely misses her.
Because he's like she goes to his room, sees he's not there, and then goes back to hers. They realize
Yeah,
he's in the kitchen getting like a midnight snack, and then comes back.
yes, that where Frasier is cursed. Frasier
Yeah,
can't make things work.
yeah,
Yeah, I think if the ski lodge isn't the best episode of the show, which I think it is,
yeah.
I always think tied up there is Ham Radio.
Ham Radio is also amazing. That
Ham
was one of
Radio
the
is
ones I watched as a
fantastic.
kid that always stuck with me.
Mhm.
Oh yeah,
That's the one I remember, perhaps being the youngest and watching and loving.
yeah.
For years in my family, Look Out, He's Got a Nug was a joke, uh,
Yeah.
where it's the it's that is an episode where in a very short period of time they build something up with these layered callbacks
Hmm.
to previous behavior, and the setup, and again that Frasier being his own worst enemy thing, where him trying to coach
Hey,
Niles as an actor,
hey, Niles warns him in the very beginning, like
in the
first few
very beginning.
minutes. He's like, "Oh, you're because he's going to direct this, radio play," and Niles is
Yeah.
like, "You're a terrible director. You can't get out of your own way. Like, you're
Yep.
going to over direct everyone. And you're going to go crazy, and it's going to fall apart."
Yep.
And
And
that's what happens.
It's usually Martin that gives that warning. Martin is, is both the audience surrogate and the Greek chorus of that show frequently, where he portends the coming doom by just saying point blank,
shut your big bazoo.
Stuff
like that.
Yes. Actually, I know we're talking favorite episodes. Martin, she's such a groovy lady.
Oh, that's such a good episode. It's so cute.
The Martin attempting to write a Frank Sinatra jazz standard and then having it sung at a funeral for someone that none of them liked is one of the transcendent moments of that show. Frequently, Frasier makes use of musical numbers, I think, really, really well. In the Look Before You Leap episode with Buttons and Bows, which is the comedic capstone on that. But watching Martin, Niles, and Frasier write this jazz standard number for Frank Sinatra is such joyful television, even though it has a lot of, the episode is largely centered around a funeral, but it manages to be an episode about how loving and supportive the family is for one another.
It's so cute. I love watching them bond. Yeah.
Yes. And the episodes in which Frasier, Martin, and Niles bond are also some of the great ones.
Like we mentioned Agates earlier,
Yes. And a lot of it is over shared heartship. Shared heartbreak. There's that great scene where right after Niles is finalizing his divorce, them standing out on the balcony, all three of them having just gotten out of relationships, realizing that none of them are terribly lucky in love, as it were, which is a great sort of emotional bonding moment where they share this feeling. And Frasier does a great job of that, of turning what should be sad things into comforting things.
Oh yeah, there's an early episode where the episode where if they find out that they think that Martin cheated on their mother, but it's revealed that it's the other way around, like we mentioned earlier in this. That's like season 1 or 2. It's super early.
I think
but then Martin and Frasier bond over like they both had spouses that cheated on them, and how powerless and crappy it made them feel. Obviously Martin and Hester were able to overcome it, where Frasier and Lilith were not. But like it's a genuine human moment and a great connection that the two of them have, and just there's that stuff's the reason like I come back to the show. I think year after, not necessarily year after year, but like I'll come back to it after a while, where it's like not just that it's funny, but like it's a genuinely like great and like heartwarming, and like it tugs at your heartstrings the right way, because even when it's bittersweet or like does kind of want to make you feel bad, like it's still really satisfying and compelling television. Like I think it still has like a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes or something. I've been watching it on Peacock, and like
what is wrong with those 3% of people?
Oh, there's always those 3% of people.
I'm gonna find them and write them angry letters.
For the same reason, there's always like 3% of people that are gonna like Batman v Superman. Stuff like that.
They're like 90% of Twitter, but it's 3% of real people.
I mean, I'm so glad I never got involved with Twitter. Speaking of modern things, though, I think it's finally moving ahead, but they've been talking about doing like a reboot or like a remake or reunion or some rething of this for so long.
It's like been like 2 years.
Yeah. Do you think it's something that could come back?
I mean, I think it's going to, because something that I think about a lot is I feel like the internet sort of destroyed civilization in a lot of ways. In the sense that we don't have a lot of appointment viewing television anymore. We don't have a lot of things that are cultural events in the way things used to be when we had significantly more limited options. Culture is significantly more fractile. It's far more broken up than it used to be. So when you get something that's appointment viewing, something like Game of Thrones, where it seems like everybody's watching it that week, it's still only getting 11 million people to watch it, when Frasier was getting 18 million a week. Not on the big episodes, just on a regular episode.
Oh yeah, and then like you see images of like the Seinfeld finale where like everyone's watching it in Times Square, stuff like that.
People are gathered outdoors to watch this thing. so media companies like to go back to older properties because they know it has a broader base of nostalgia or fandom or whatever. So I think it's almost inevitable that things in the
Oh,
pre-internet era come back.
when I say like when it could come back, I don't mean like whether or not like they like NBC or whatever would bring it back, but I mean
Oh,
could like that way that it would work.
I
I want to be in the sense of being positive because I think it would not. I don't think it actually would work, but I
yeah,
think an angle they could take it is like we don't have John Mahoney anymore.
I think
Um,
that's a big
that's
problem
a
for
big
them.
problem for it now, and like I don't want to see this situation where like Niles and Frasier are like complaining about life over his grave.
Oh,
But I think a way that it could work is where Frasier and or Niles are in that father position, and it's more about like Frederick or whatever Daphne and Niles' kid is about, and maybe it's like from a different angle reconnecting. That could work. I don't know if it would. Um,
I think one of the I have thought about this. I've talked about this with a number of people because I have a lot of conversations about Frasier because I love
mhm,
Frasier. Um,
that's fine.
I think the only way it really works is if it kind of centers the Frederick Frasier relationship,
Yeah,
because the show really between Cheers, which charted his sort of younger days, and then you get Frasier, which charts him into middle age, and now you essentially have old Frasier. You
yeah,
have a Frasier that will be older at the start of the show than John Mahoney was supposed to be
yeah.
at the start of of Frasier, where you've got this significantly older character, and you need to have sort of that connection. What I would love to see them do
Hmm.
is to if you somehow got most of the old Frasier cast back together, I would love for Daphne and Niles's son David
Hmm.
to become the Maris of that show.
Where you just never see him.
I would like to never see him and for him to just get weirder and weirder and weirder as the show goes on. To have him be this sort of never seen figure who's just living a bizarre life somewhere else.
Like maybe he
That,
like travels and explores and stuff too, and like it's more
yeah,
like what weird place he is now, like kind of like that the character from Fraggle Rock that sends him a postcard.
Uncle Traveling Matt.
Yeah, exactly. I'm
Yeah.
terrible with names, so I'm glad you knew what I was talking about. Um,
I as an uncle who is named Matt, I
that
feel a
makes
kinship,
sense.
although I don't travel.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, especially these days. Uh,
uh,
but I think the Frederick Fraser relationship would be a good place to go. But like I don't know what the angle is going to be because I don't think we could
yeah,
do like the you couldn't do like he's now a blue collar kind of guy.
yeah. I
He's
fear.
raised by Lilith, so
Yeah,
he's already
I
kind of like a weird nerdy kid. Like
yeah I have a great fear because when I have learned over the years that people who are very creative are best at being creative when they are put under severe restrictions.
I agree.
Uh, and
There's I
I
have so
fear
many
what happens.
examples. Yeah, like where
Yeah,
that like basically any of these adult cartoons that come back, like Family Guy or Futurama, once they're like, all right, whatever you did works, like go nuts. It's like never near. It's just it's too
not as
extreme.
good.
It doesn't restrictions force you to be clever,
Right.
and being clever makes you being memorable.
Yes. Yeah, and it like when Arrested Development came back.
Oh yeah, that's a sad
Where
story.
Arrested Development was for 3 seasons, it was at the top of its game, and then we were all excited for it to come back, and they gave them no restrictions. They could make the episode lengths whatever they wanted. They had all these weird things going on. I worry about what an unchecked Kelsey Grammer would do with the show,
Yeah,
because clearly he's going to have more influence over it than any executive producer, than any writer would.
yeah,
Um, and there were significant restrictions placed on that show, not only from the get. I mean, Kelsey Grammer originally wanted it not to be a spinoff of Cheers. He wanted to play a Larry Flint type character who ran a magazine and had been shot, and the nurse was for him, not his father.
yeah. That's
Uh,
so. Ugh.
yeah, he there's a lot of, if we had gone with Kelsey Grammer's version of the show, it gets canceled
Six
in season
episodes
one.
in,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
They might not even made it past pilot. Like,
yeah, I don't know if it. I mean, it didn't even make it to pilot. Technically, they sort of stepped in and went, "No, we're just going to do Frasier, and
yeah.
here's how we're going to do it." So I wonder how it would work if it was sort of unchecked. I think that I don't know. There's a lot of things I foresee going wrong.
I think it's much more likely to be terrible and embarrassing than it is to be any good.
Yeah,
From
which is
what
sad.
from what I understand of Kelsey Grammer, at least in real life, I don't want to get too much into like personal stuff. Like from what I've read in interviews and things, he doesn't seem like he's a good actor. I don't think he's a great like initial idea kind of guy.
No,
If that makes any sense.
And Kelsey Grammer's had a very, very sad life.
Yeah, it's. I'm not trying to say this stuff to be mean or insulting.
No. And listen,
it comes from a place of love. Like
yes, like I love Frasier. If I thought there was a way for them to do a Frasier reboot and for it to be really, really good, I'd be all over that.
I think maybe if it was like even like movie length, like a special like reunion episode, I don't think it
that'd
would
be
work.
Great.
I don't think it can work as a series again.
I don't know if it can. I mean, and they could absolutely. I do not discount the ability that they could absolutely prove me wrong.
Oh, I would love to be proven wrong.
Yeah. Once upon a time, I railed against Heath Ledger being the Joker. And after that, we all lost our opinions, our right to be definitively correct about things.
I remember when we talked about this in the Batman episode we did a couple months ago. With that Joker thing specifically, I remember when Dark Knight Rises and they're like, people were like, Anne Hathaway is Catwoman. She's
the best part of that movie.
I was like, you know what? I said the same thing about Heath Ledger, and it's one of the best Batman performances of all time.
Yeah.
Like I was like, I'm going to shut up now. And
I reserve the right to be wrong about this because I have been wrong about stuff like this in the past. It's going to be a hell of a needle to thread, though.
Yeah,
it's going to be real hard for them to make it work. I do not envy the task.
Yeah, I would rather be in the timeline where that does work.
Of course,
I wouldn't relish like that failing in any way.
No,
but that said, like I'm also realistic, and I don't have a lot of faith in it. And I'm also always of the opinion sometimes, like like Pet Sematary, sometimes dead is better. Sometimes these things were great. Like we got 11 seasons of almost all gold. That is unbelievable. And that's such an incredibly that is an accomplishment is
yes
amazing to everyone involved in series over the years. And like you're gonna then maybe like leave a really terrible taste in people's mouths after the fact, like like 20 years later, like when nobody's begging for this other than probably like Kelsey Grammer, because like what has he been in besides the X-Men movies, like Money Plane?
He's tried to get other sitcoms off the ground, none of which are terribly good, and all of which he had a greater degree of control over. So I mean, things like Back to You, which was a show where he played a TV anchor, him and Patricia Heaton, from Malcolm in the Middle.
Oh, I remember this one. I remember that one.
Yeah, I mean, he's done a couple of things like that.
Yeah,
but they've never super come off well.
I mean, his best roles are Frasier, Sideshow Bob, and Beast.
Hey, those are 3 damn good roles.
Perfect Beast. I'm so glad he did it and was like in makeup and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it worked. If that's all you get to do with your career, congratulations. That's still phenomenal work.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, like, because including Cheers, like that's like 20 years of playing one character. I also can understand, like, I personally would be like, oh my god, I've explored everything I could do with this character. I'd be kind of done. Maybe there's like an interesting angle that we're not seeing that they are because they were involved with the show. I don't know, but I still would be an incredible accomplishment, and I'd be really proud of. As I'm sure it's won Emmys over the course of its run. It could not have.
Frasier, if I'm not mistaken, it's one of the most awarded shows of all time.
Yeah, anecdotally, that's what I can remember it being. So Janeway's also in an season 2-parter of Cheers. Talking about some more Star Trek stuff. I also love speaking of Star Trek stuff. I love that Noel is a Star Trek nerd.
Oh, it's fantastic.
I
And
love
then
that he tries to teach Frasier Hebrew for Frederick's bar mitzvah, but he teaches him Klingon.
Klingon instead, and
Yeah.
as a form of revenge.
Yeah, because he didn't get this William Shatner signed thing.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
37 Emmy wins.
So yeah, I was also just looking it up. All right. I was trying to go to start my Star Trek well to stall.
No, yeah, it's the it was a beloved, it was sort of a critical darling when it was on TV. It was I think it's incredibly well remembered by people in sort of the comedy industry. I think it's pretty well remembered by the general public, although not as beloved as a Friends or The Office or Seinfeld.
Yeah, see, to me it and Seinfeld, I guess because they're contemporaries, like I put them hand in hand with like the top shows of that era. Even though
so different.
Yeah, it's an apples and oranges thing. And I love both shows. They both greatly affected my sense of humor and like what I like in comedy. But I was just gonna bring up, like, I think Frasier's got a timeless quality to it. Like most, I mean, granted, yes, the most dated thing about it is it's a radio show, and like, but like essentially, like that's what we're doing right now. It's a podcast.
Yeah, Frasier has a podcast now.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, podcast.
Not that that's what I want the show to be like a joke about, but you know, with them bringing it back, but like, because I think the show focuses so much on being human relationships, and you know, like just the drama of navigating the world, like emotionally. Like, I think that's a timeless quality that I think anyone could still watching it into it. Like, I'm amazed. Like, we have a couple of young people that work at the store, and see, John, I think, is 19 now. He just watched Seinfeld for the first time last year during the pandemic, and I know he loves it. So I was like, oh, okay, that makes me feel better about liking the show. So I kind of want him to watch Frasier. My brother's fiance is just watching Seinfeld for the first time and loves it. Which was like, he and I grew up with it, so it's like fun for him. It's fun going back and revisiting it. It's just that's one of those shows that like I burned out like on repeat viewings. Like I haven't gone back to in a while. So, you know, maybe I'll tackle that after I'm done Frasier here. But like, I don't want to compare them too much. But again, I do think Frasier might be the smarter show. Just because the joke, everything's more layered. It's more focused.
Yes. Yes. I think you're going to get more laughs per minute in a Seinfeld, but I think Frasier is, I think it's a more rewarding show at the end of the day.
Yeah, because Seinfeld, they specifically don't try to like have the characters grow or learn anything, which is its own,
be human.
Yeah, which is its own version of comedy that works.
Yes,
it works fantastic for that show. But this show like isn't afraid to play with the characters, and I think that's going to be its secret to like finding enduring appeal. I think it'll outlive us. Like I said, it doesn't have like that 90+ rating on Rotten Tomatoes for no reason, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess we kind of exhausted most of what we could talk about without just going into, hey, remember this episode where this happened and this happened, even though we did some of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, is there anything you wanted to bring up that we haven't touched on yet?
I think Frasier has, as you said, an enduring appeal. I recommend it very highly. I'm an evangelist for this program. I think everybody should watch it, purely to give me things to talk about, and so that the lines when I quote them won't sound just like craziness.
Oh yeah, or like you're reading like a book about Freud.
Yes. Yes. But I think it's fantastic. If you haven't watched the show and you listen to all of this, we probably didn't sound totally lucid, but it's a show that you should check out.
And even though we kind of spoiled elements of certain episodes, there's so much good stuff that we did not spoil. And there's so much good stuff in those episodes we did not spoil. So there's still
yes.
So if you haven't watched, I would say go ahead and watch it. I know our friend Harry's been watching it with his girlfriend, which I don't think he's watched it all the way through before.
He hasn't. I recommended it to him quite some time ago, and he sputtered and started with it. But it's a phenomenal television show for anyone to watch it anytime with any other human beings.
Yeah. Well, and for that token, he got me starting watching Taxi, because I hadn't seen that since the 80s either.
Yeah. Oh.
But like the thing that sucks about Taxi is like, at least Frasier, you can go on Peacock. It's free. to stream the whole show, you just have to watch the occasional like minute commercial break. And but like Taxi's just scattershot everywhere with just episodes. It's like impossible to find what you're looking for. But speaking
I
of
get
that,
it.
Christopher Lloyd's a big part of the Frasier, and he never shows up on it. You know, you see him as executive producer all the
Well,
time.
it's a different Christopher Lloyd.
Is it a different Christopher
It's
Lloyd?
a
I wasn't
different
sure.
Christopher Lloyd.
All right.
It's one of those great confusions where it's the other one.
Okay.
But I will say I had a very, very similar problem recently with News Radio, where I ended up just buying all of it on Amazon streaming because it was the only place I could figure out how to get it simply.
Yeah.
Because it's just nowhere to be found.
Yeah, News Radio is another one of those good shows too.
Oh, it's phenomenal. It's a fantastic show.
There's some good stuff from the 80s and
in the 90s. Yeah, it's good times.
Good
times.
I just remember it being more like, I guess again it's the age thing because I was a kid in the 90s, but I remember being more like disposable crap that you go back to and watch now, and it's just like, oh god. But this is one of the shows I think holds up. I think this is the show that holds up the best. I'm gonna plant my flag on that.
I would agree with that one. I think there's only a couple episodes here and there where there's some tone deaf stuff as far as aging goes.
Yeah,
some of those Dr. Mary episodes, but
there's one or two things that come up as like, oh yeah, like that wouldn't fly now. Like I just recently watched Pee-wee's Big Adventure the other day to record a potential commentary track for this podcast in case I need a week off. Where it's like, oh yeah, there's some weird stuff like Native American stuff in his front yard. I'm like, oh yeah, I that makes like it's just like a bunch of little things like that kind of like stick out to me now.
They were more ignorant times. But overall, Frasier ages well because it's about the relationships between the characters and not really about them interacting with the rest of the world. It's about this very insular group of people.
And when they do, it's not mean-spirited. It's more mean-spirited towards like the characters not getting how these things work.
Yeah, again, they are their own worst enemies. They don't need anyone outside antagonizing them.
You know, it's kind of the secret,
except for Cam Winston.
Yeah, it's kind of Cam Winston's great. It's one of those things that makes like It's Always Sunny kind of work, and like that show obviously goes way more into like extremes, but like it's because it's the characters are terrible, and they are the reason that their lives are miserable.
Right,
is why they can kind of get into like racism and homophobia and stuff, and like it
doesn't hit as hard. It doesn't hit as negative.
It's the they're the bad people. Like you're not supposed to like them. So it's funny and gratifying to watch them be miserable and fail.
Yeah.
Not that Frasier isn't anywhere near that dark. It is still ultimately, I think the show ends on a very positive note, if not ambiguous. And I think that's why I wouldn't want to see a continuation.
Yeah, they would have to settle the hash of how the show ends, which is again ambiguous.
Yeah, and I don't want to get into it now and what I think about it, because ultimately I hope you do come away from this episode at least curious, and just again, it's free on Peacock. I would suggest watching it. You can mention like the couple of episodes we saw, Ski Lodge, The Matchmaker,
Innkeepers.
Innkeepers a good one to start with too.
Yeah,
like those ones if you want to just like dip your toes. Otherwise, I'd say just jump in. You don't need to have watched Cheers at all.
No.
A couple of characters do show up from that, like
they will explain.
Yeah, it's enough where like, oh, Sam Malone showed up, or Diane's in it. In fact, the first time Diane shows up, it's kind of funny where she has this play and it's very clearly Cheers. And that's someone who's now watched the show after watching Cheers. I appreciate more of that.
Yeah, I never did a full watch of Cheers until I got really into Frasier, where I was like, okay, clearly there's some additional information I could get out of watching the Cheers stuff. And Cheers is a great show on its own. I think we've done quite a bit to recommend it on its virtues.
Yeah.
But Frasier, I think it's a better show all around.
I definitely agree. And in watching Cheers for the first time a couple of years ago, I don't think this is my bias talking, but I do think, Frasier and Lilith's characters are my favorite part. By the end of the show, are my favorite part of it.
Oh, yeah.
Once it becomes more of an ensemble like focus,
Yes.
rather than just the Sam and Diane thing, which
Mhm.
I do like, but like that's the show moves away from that.
Mhm.
That's the show I think went on too long. I don't really like Sabic, whatever her name is. Um,
Rebecca Howe is the name of the character.
yeah,
The actress,
Kirstie Alley is
Kirstie
what I was trying
Alley.
to remember. Again,
Uh,
so much Star Trek stuff. That's where my brain
yeah,
works. Um,
poor Savick.
yeah, which I got to do a Star Trek episode soon. I haven't done one in a while. I try to space them out. I just need to figure out. I just need to figure out an angle to do it because, like, I don't want to just complain about the new Star Trek shows because I don't like them. I try to stick on stuff that's positive. Maybe we'll do like you were on the Deep Space Nine episode where we kind of kept it nice and vague. Maybe we'll do one where we get into like specific stuff that we like.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see about that.
Garrick would have done very well on Frasier.
Oh yeah, I love
Let's
Garrick is
just put
Garrick's,
Garrick in
Garrick's
Frasier.
essentially a space Frasier character. He's almost Gil Chesterton with ridges.
Oh man, he romps in the Spens and Finneys and his boyhood show home in Surrey. It's a good show. It's a good show.
Yeah.
People watch Frasier. Frasier, come on, it's Frasier.
It's another great 90s show, you know. It's
Yeah.
funny and it's got heart. Except that one has spaceships and monsters.
And there's only one episode of Frasier with spaceships.
Which one's that?
The Candidate.
Oh, yes. All right, watch that episode to find out what we're talking about.
Yeah, go watch The Candidate.
I know what you're talking. I'm thinking like, I was like, oh, did he buy Frederick like a? Because that is the one where he's trying to get he's Christmas shopping for him last minute, and like I see all these
The
90
Living
things in the
Brain.
background. Yeah, well, in the background there's Super Nintendos and like in box copies of Earthbound. Like,
oh man,
scoop that up now. You can resell it and make so much money.
Yes.
That's one of the things like I stand out, like, you know, like working in a video game store for as long as I have. But yeah, with that said, we're starting to ramble. Yeah,
right.
Let's watch it, recommend it to all of your friends. Please let me know what you think of it. I am curious if like someone who's fresh to it now, what their thoughts are, because like something like this is so embedded in like my comedy DNA that it's really hard to be objective about it. But I do think that this show is still really funny and holds up. Like rewatching it now, it's not like I'm laughing because I remember these things happening. Although I very frequently remember every episode almost immediately. I do think stuff is still genuinely funny.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. So I guess with that, we'll end it here. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining me.
Always a pleasure.
We'll have you back on again soon. I know this was a thing that we've been talking about doing for a while.
Yes.
Like I know it's an old Hailing Frequencies joke. Yeah. I have other friends that might want to get into it. Maybe we'll deep dive into some specific episodes or characters. But I think it's a fun overview. I think we did our job well.
We did a fine job.
But yeah, so until next time, everyone, be safe.